great to meet you. Martin Scorsese, thank you for joining me here at Apple Music. And I'm so excited to talk to you about this incredible film, Killers of the Flower Moon. Talk about music, talk about art, talk about life.
Uh-oh.
You know, this film, as of the time of this conversation, is about to come out. It hasn't actually been released to the general public yet. Do you have a ritual? Do you do anything small or large to celebrate a moment like that?
We used to in New York. We used to go at that time to the Russian tea room and have a little caviar and champagne. At that time, that's now 40 years ago. After a while, there weren't openings like this, though, before. I mean, unless I was 13 years old, my cousin took me up to see a big Hollywood premiere at the Roxy Theater in 1956. I think it was 55. And it was Giant, which is a film which obviously influenced this film a great deal. And somehow he got a hold of a ticket and convinced one of the ushers that he lost his other ticket and could we let us in, and we got in to see Giant. I mean, those were premiere days of the old Hollywood premieres.
Was it like you portrayed it on The Aviator? Was it like that?
Absolutely. People screaming as Rock Hudson got out of the car, people screaming. James Dean had just died, but they were screaming for him too. And we got in there, and then suddenly there was this life-transforming experience up on the giant screen at the Roxy Theater, the epic American film, in a way. Many different, because he made three. It's a trilogy, Shane, Giant, A Place in the Sun, Shane, Giant. But in any event, George Stevens. In any event, that's a premiere. And we've had some premieres like that over the years.
Yeah.
But now it's become something where I think the quieter rumination, so to speak, along with family and a few of the friends who made the film, that's where we go with that.
It's a nice thought to be able to reflect with the people you care about the most.
Exactly.
But also to have had a moment at a really formative time in your life where to experience a premiere of that scale, it leaves an indelible footprint on your ambition, on your drive, your dream.
It really did. I think that sense of the epic came from that picture. And I got to work with Boris Levin, who did the production design, too. I got to work with him in New York, The Last Waltz, Color of Money, even elements of Last Temptation of Christ, The King of Comedy. And so it was like a dream come true. There's that balance that I've made over the years between my embracing and inspiration for the Hollywood grandly produced pictures, sometimes spectacles, other times intense psychodramas like Sunset Boulevard or, the Bad and the Beautiful, things like that. These were key films I saw at the age of 10, 11, 12, 13. And so that and this films of the Italian neorealism, which I saw at 5 or 6 years old on television. Small 16-inch black and white TV.
You've done it all. I mean, you've weaved it all the way through. I mean,
and it just, they came together. And I knew they were both movies, but I didn't know, the Italian ones I hadn't seen in a theater. They were on this little small screen, but they were speaking the language that my grandparents were speaking, that my parents were speaking. It was a direct link as to who we were, are, etc. The other films are codified in a way. The Hollywood films, you had feelings similar to the characters in the film. You could really go with it, even in The Heiress, for example, which is based on the novel or novella by Henry James, Washington Square, through the Getz, husband and wife team of the Getz, who did the play. That I saw when I was about 10 years old, my father. And that stayed with me, too, the relationship between Montgomery Clift, Morris, and Catherine, played by Olivia de Havilland. Did he really love her? And that became the basis, a great sense of a touchstone, really, the real touchstone for Molly and Ernest in Killers of the Flower Moon.
To have had the emotional maturity, even without probably acknowledging it at 10 years old, to absorb something as complex as that and for it to stay with you. Most people translate experiences like that into some kind of artistic experience because they experience it directly. Divorce, trauma, things that tend to get translated over the course of a life through the filter of
That's
art.
interesting. You're right, because my parents, I came from a world where you didn't get divorced.
Yeah.
But there were arguments, there were discussions, there were
Tell me about
differences.
it. My parents did get divorced, and in Auckland, New Zealand, I felt like we were the second family to get
Oh, really?
divorced in the country.
No, I understand.
Small country, probably not far off.
Not far off, I know. Well, my parents' family, of course, comes from the Sicilian.
Don't do it.
So it is a small, almost medieval community that was there in Lower Manhattan, quite honestly, in 1949, 1950 to 1960. By 60, the old ones started dying off.
So do you think that in part that informed your the gravitational pull towards emotional, something emotionally resonant that you weren't experiencing?
Yes.
Because of those parameters?
Yes, exactly. And also because my father took me to see it, and we were experiencing these emotions up there on the screen together, which he didn't talk about.
Wow.
See, but we experienced
Do you think he knew that at the time?
I think so. It was a special bond somehow. Then at a certain point, I was able to go see the films by myself.
Yeah.
Because it was, dangerous neighborhood to walk up Second Avenue as a young teenager.
New York, huh?
It was a little difficult. But at a certain point, you knew where to go, what side of the street to walk on, which route to take, etc. But, these experiences from Rear Window to Shane to Bad and the Beautiful to Sunset Boulevard to The Heiress to The Red Shoes to The River by Jean Renoir to Outcasts of the Islands with Carol Reed's version of the Joseph Conrad song. All these things I shared with him.
That was a way of communicating. It's a beautiful thing. You've again, as I tried to put into words before, you've taken all these inspirations and this idea of how grand it can be and how big it can feel and how out of this world Hollywood can make it into your life's work. And you've walked all of the lines. You've made the biggest films, and then you've had great success making the films that probably shouldn't have even been made.
They shouldn't have been made, no. And playing, for me, it's always been playing with, and it really became apparent with Italian American, a film I made of my mother and father in 1974. I began to realize that I try to but break this compartmentalization of documentary and fiction film. Just smash it. And stylistically at first, where my parents were talking on camera and I had questions for them, but the minute we put the slate in front of my mother, they took over and they started saying things. And then next thing you know, we had the questions, but the questions were just little touchstones that began their own stories, and then they made them comfortable. And then they started talking about that my father didn't like the way my tooth looked. He didn't like my beard. There were things like this. So that, you suddenly...
They're playing a character in order to tell the truth in a weird way.
Yeah. And they just started to go. And then I said, that's it. I saw that also in a little bit in Shirley Clarke's Portrait of Jason. I had a sense of that, where she had the guts to hold the camera on this guy and let him talk. But in any event, Italian American's a little different. Then we went into, of course, The Last Waltz, which kind of complemented New York, and into Raging Bull. They complement it. The documentaries, so. That kind of documentaries, and they sort of complement them. American Boy, New York, like the Dylan films.
You had to almost approach it that way, I'd imagine, because concert films were not theatrical. They were not made on that scale. This was one of the first, if not the first, that I remember hearing about after the fact, obviously, that kind of started the whole idea of this is a band. Yes, it's an important moment. It's the end of a very important band. They're going out at the right time.
Yeah.
Which
they really did.
Don't you wish more had a little bit?
I think so.
Some do overstay, and it's like when you can choose to go out.
Yeah, but when you can choose to go out, but then you have a new album by the Rolling Stones, and they're magnificent.
They're clear examples.
Magnificent.
Yeah, for sure. But when you talk about Last Waltz, and it is interesting because when you talk about breaking that line between documentary and feature film, it's like you direct that film like it's a feature film, but it's not. It's a live concert, and it is a real life event.
And this, why I can talk about it that way is that we didn't intend to do that. In other words, we were discovering as we went along. First, it was Jonathan Taplin, who had produced Mean Streets, introduced me to Robbie. We loved the band. We loved Dylan. But we loved the band, the Big Pink and Brown Album and all on Stage Fright. This music, I was saying the other night, there was no sound like that.
No, they were outlaws in their own way. I mean, every single individual and then coming together as a band. They were the most badass band out there.
I mean, really.
Unbelievable.
We don't know where that was coming from. And yet it was all the threads of American music, British, Scottish, Mississippi Delta, all together.
And it was kind of protest music as well. That's what I loved about it. It was a strange line between celebrating that history, but also picking it apart.
Yeah, exactly. Taking it apart is right. But they came to me and said, "Would you want to do this?" And they told me of all the different. John told me about all the different contributors. Muddy Waters, Joni Mitchell, Neil Young, everybody. Van Morrison. So I said, "Okay." The idea was just to get it recorded, and we started. I think you may know this. We started with the idea of maybe doing it on a video. A video was quite poor at the time. And we saw some examples of black and white videos. And I said, this is something for the Smithsonian. I said, this is the real creation of American music. All the different threads coming together. This is a tapestry of American music up to this point. Now, yes, there were other groups and bands, but all the elements are there. Chicago blues, Mississippi Delta, everything. It's all there. I said, so this has got to have a special. So then we thought maybe 16 millimeter again. And I had been an assistant director and one of the editors on Woodstock. And I thought that, and having been on the stage for those 4 days and nights, and I'd been there, I thought that the use of the 16 millimeter camera and the split screen had been done. And I also worked on Elvis on Tour as an editor, split screen again. And so I said, it's been done to that. Then also they keep showing the audience. I said, I've had it with the audience. I want to see the performers. I want to watch Jazz on a Summer's Day with Bert Stern, where he just holds the camera on Jimmy Jufrey or Anita O'Day or Louis Armstrong and the great Jack Teagarden. I mean, come on.
It's so true. It was almost like a default apology for filming a performer on stage because you have to show someone half naked dancing around in the mud.
I mean, Woodstock did that, and that's what Woodstock was, I must say.
I get it, but there was a lot of it.
Yeah, but that's what it was, though. Yeah. In other words, it was an event, not just a music event. It was a cultural event. Yeah. But here, when you say you're doing a film on the band, you have Muddy Waters standing there, you have Joni playing, Coyote. I mean, stay on her. It's in between the lines. Watch what they do with their eyes and their mouths and how they move their heads, how they get into a line. Don't cut away to the guitarist. Don't cut away to the keyboard right away. The way you see. Just hold as much as you can. Yeah. As much as you can. And so with 16 millimeter, we thought of that, but something happened. I got to know Robbie a bit, and maybe it was that there was une folie de deux. The two of us together were crazy. That maybe separately we were crazy in a different way.
So you made your crazy okay? Or crazy?
No, we were crazy okay anyway. But I don't really speak for him that much. But together we really weren't crazy. Meaning, so I had come up with the idea. Let's do it in 35 millimeter, and that hadn't been done. That hadn't been done before. That kind of concert. Now, there was the Sanders brothers. I believe they did the Elvis film. This is Elvis, I think, in 35 in Vegas, but it's quite controlled. This would be different. However, the one advantage we had was that we knew who was going to be on stage where and where they're going to be standing and if they're going to be moving around. I mean, it's not a group where they were dancing around on stage. The band didn't do that. There wasn't always one lead singer. One song, you have 4 voices. That's interesting. The same character, by the way. We somehow, Jonathan, they got the money together, and UA backed us. Eric Pleskow, Mike Medavoy. They had done New York. We're finishing up Apocalypse Now. They were the beginnings of Heaven's Gate and Raging Bull. They already gave a green light to Raging Bull. So this was a little later. Raging Bull was a little later, but that was the studio that was allowing these sorts of
risks were being taken already. I mean, this is what I have to thank you for, and I have to thank the person who greenlit that and Robbie and the band for encouraging you to take part in it. You set off a chain of events that ultimately gave birth to this new idea of what music could be. It wasn't just a ticket in your hand to go and see something, or it wasn't, to your point, being marginalized with split screens and there's, that'll do.
Oh, that was wonderful, though, when we in Woodstock.
Great.
It was really, and especially, I mean, some of some of the performances, they were extraordinary. But there's a different time.
You gave it a moment where it felt like music could stand alongside the big,
exactly.
big theatrical. And it introduced you to Robbie, which is, will now go down in history as one of the great collaborative relationships as well as friendships. But I can only speak to the collaboration of cinema and music history, like absolutely amazing.
He just got mad at me when I liked the punk movement.
Oh, but he was the most punk guy out there.
Yeah, and he said that he really, really, we were living together in my house a small house up in Mulholland Drive. And he would just come in sometimes and say, lower it. It's too loud. I said, no, but it's the Clash. He goes, I don't care. He said, I don't care. They have no musicianship. None. They can't play the guitar. They can't play. I said, doesn't matter.
Yeah, they have
that
great taste.
That doesn't matter.
They got great taste.
Yeah. And then he did concede with Elvis Costello, though. He conceded. When I showed the album, we went into the old Tower Records, myself and Jay Cox, who was beginning to, he was a movie critic, but he was beginning to write rock criticism, Time magazine. And we saw all this English punk music, and we looked around and said, grab that one, The Jam, grab that one, The Clash, that's got to be something. And then we saw this Elvis Costello. He said, take this one, because with that name, he better be good.
And you know what? I think if anybody knew that, it was Elvis Costello.
He was. The Angels want to steal my red shoes. Come on. That whole album was extraordinary.
Stunning.
Plus his other albums later on.
Yeah.
So he gave, Elvis, okay, because Elvis was writing that stuff and he would play it and, but when it came to the Clash, he didn't hate them. It's just that it would hurt his ears. It didn't like the sound of the way they were expressing themselves with the instruments. I mean, they were learning in the instruments.
Yeah. It brings me to a question about this incredible film, Killers of the Flower Moon, which congratulations. And I say that with a heavy heart because it's such a heavy film and so sad. But I say congratulations because you have created the most beautiful, again, Smithsonian retelling of that story. Very important to everybody involved in it. Robbie Robertson, of course, being First Nations of Indigenous descent, and the Osage people, and everyone who's invested time and resources and money to tell the story, and yourself, who charged yourself with the opportunity to do that. With all that being said, and with all due respect to your filmography, is this the most important film that you've ever made?
Well, you define the word important.
That there is a historical retelling here that if you don't get the detail and the nuances correct, that it's more than a bad review.
Well, the point is, does art have to be important for the moment? How should I put it? Art should be important all the time. You follow?
Yeah.
And then it'll fall out of importance, and then it might come back into importance. You could talk about literature. You could talk about the fact that Herman Melville, he stopped writing stuff, I'm comparing myself. I'm just saying that you could talk about that Van Gogh only sold one painting. You can go on and on like this. So we have to think in terms of importance. I'm very, very, very satisfied in a way that this picture has been through the nature of events and through time and through the pandemic. And this is how the film finally found its way to the public at this point in time. We didn't plan this, but it seems fortuitous. And I'm very happy because I do think as we were, to address your idea of importance again in the story, I was very, very cognizant. And it's one of the reasons I pulled back at first from doing it. I was very cognizant because I understood that there's much more to the story of just one horrific series of events, one horrific series of events. Let's say in with the Osage Nation, that if I can make that to reflect history, to reflect who we are as human beings, to reflect, basically the European Americans coming in and taking, and they said, well, you can go to the Sumerians and you could see the Assyrians did this and the Elamites did that and, all of that. Well, yeah. And they're still doing it. It's still because the land is there and that's what, the land has the water, the land has the grazing area, that sort of thing. So in a way, can this reflect the macrocosm of who we are as human beings in greed. And I think that's where I forced myself to go with the story, and Leo went with me on that. Leo just went. Eric Roth, a couple of friends of mine. It took a while, and a lot of the time I was doing it by myself because of the pandemic. I was working on the script, so that we just said, this is the story, and basically, no matter how many good people there were trying to treat the indigenous with some respect and dignity, they were overwhelmed by those who just wanted what they had. There's
two very prevailing sort of themes as someone who really loved the film, but was very deeply moved by the film. It's just absolute vulnerability and absolute vulgarity. And,
yeah.
And those two things I don't often see on screen fighting each other to that degree, because like Lily Gladstone, what an incredible performance to take those moments where Leo DiCaprio is frustrated and lost and lashing out, not even believing his own words. Right?
I know he's not believing.
Not even believing his own words. and then you have Robert De Niro's character William Hale, who is just doing it exactly the same thing, but in far more of a sort of convincing, conniving kind of way, and she's just absorbing it all.
Yeah, because, and this is what we found out. The first thing I did when I saw the title of the book and I started reading, I said, anything to do with indigenous. I know from Robbie too. And from an experience I had back in the 74, I was on the Pine Ridge Reservation for a couple of days, and I was traumatized by, I didn't understand that that's the way people were forced to live. I didn't know that. I was too young. And so over the years, it stayed with me. And so I said, we go in, we got to make sure we do it right. Not hagiography of the noble Native American, that was done in the 20s, And I found out from meeting the Osage and from a number of the family, the descendants of the Burkharts, the descendants of the Henry the Roan horse family, that I was told, don't forget, one guy told me, he said, don't forget, Bill Hale and Henry Roan were best friends.
This is what I couldn't get my head around at the end of the film.
Great meaning horribly.
Yeah.
It's horrible, but what it is like, if we can get into that, if we could tap into what makes Bill really like Henry, and Henry loved Bill.
He believes the letter he wrote at the end. He's not trying to cover his tracks. He genuinely believes.
And by the way, that letter is real, and there's more to it. We had to cut it down. That letter's real. We just changed one name. We said how is old, and he mentions an Osage name there, and the name that he actually wrote in the letter. When Larry Fessenden had to say it, you couldn't follow what he said, so we put a name in that. We got okayed from the Osage that it would sound like what it was, which was the name of an Osage native. But the number of Osage were at his funeral.
So complex.
So then you take the love.
Yeah.
Love is a weapon. Love is a weapon, and Molly and Ernest are in love, and that's what I learned from the Osage, from Margie Burkhart, who's the great granddaughter of Ernest. She said, "Don't forget," because they were a little cautious of me because the film, I'm known for a lot of the violence in my films, the underworld, this, that, Goodfellas, Mean Streets, etc. Taxi even, there's not underworld there, but there is violence in it. They were a little concerned, but she got up and spoke at a big dinner we had, and she said she had seen silence, and she understood that there's something that I was trying for that went beyond just what somehow my more popular films are. But she pointed out, she said, don't forget, though, that Ernest and Molly were in love. And that stayed with me. And then we try to work that into the script somehow, but the Bureau of Investigation scenes were taking over. And that became more like a police procedural. And then finally, like as it is in the book, which is excellent.
It's a whole other film in itself.
Yeah, exactly. You can make that book. You can do it again. The thing about it is Leo finally came to me after about a year and a half of trying this balancing act of the love story and the FBI and all the Bureau, I should say. And he said, where's the heart of the picture?
Yeah.
And the heart of the picture, I said, it's Molly and Ernest.
It's heartbreaking.
And he said, what if I play Ernest?
Yeah.
Because he was going to play Tom Waite.
Oh, because it was going to be an FBI film, so it was going to... Right. Wow, what a pivot.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. We took the script, turned it inside out, and I got a whole new crew, except the only person who remained on my crew, there we are, new production designer, new everybody.
So you actually have that FBI film if you want to make it later on. I mean, you do have it.
No, I wasn't interested in making an FBI film. It was just interesting that these guys go down to Oklahoma. They have to, because by the time that house blows up the way it does, Somebody's got to do something.
Well, it's also a great case to launch this thing with, right? This whole concept of the FBI. It's like, all right, we got a house blown up down in Oklahoma. We can go down and make a thing here.
Well, that's one of the reasons why Hoover did that, because he wanted to make it special. He wanted a law enforcement agency that he could control.
That's why I love the radio play at the end. It's such a very clever way. It's a beautiful way of saying, hey, this for everybody, this meant something different. And for the FBI, there may have been another reason why this happened. This is brought to you by but it's...
Exactly. Well, the thing is that they went down not knowing if he could do it. And that's what's so great about the book Hoover tells Tom White. He said, none of this gunplay stuff. You're going down and you're going to send me written reports. And he wanted it a certain way. But he knew he had to send an old-timer, an old Texas Ranger in there to figure it out. The problem for me was the minute the guys come into town, I know who did it. And I always say this when we talk about the film. I know who did it. It's a matter of not who did it, who didn't do it. And it's a matter of all of us complicit.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
We are.
I'm
sorry, not that we want to be in many cases, but I think we are.
Yes. There is no natural arc per a Hollywood template here. There's no surprise ending. That you know what's going to happen. You even know who the bad guy is from date. If you really allow yourself to know, you know from the start. My wife and I watched it. We were trying to reject that reality because we were like, it cannot be this.
We put you with them.
Yeah.
So you're sharing bread with them. You're hanging out with them. You're going to somebody's office, and it's all them. And then suddenly you realize, wait a minute, these guys are really into some bad stuff. Yeah. And yes, the Native Americans, the Osage, they had their troubles. They had some difficulties. There's one point where Henry Roan says, he says, I'm ashamed to be an Osage.
Yeah, that's heartbreaking.
I'm ashamed, man. Get me some bootleg or get me a gun. And then they say, oh, well, look at them. They don't know how to handle it. Well, yeah. Look how you're treating them.
Yeah.
The dignity and also the interesting thing was I thought, why, when the Undertaker gets up and tells Leo, get the money. It's easy for you to get the money. It is. It's not, he says, it's not your money. It's his wife's money. Get some more. He said, what's the big deal? He said, the thing is the Lord says, you sow and you reap and you sow and you reap. Then, what he's saying basically is you get rewarded by God for your effort and work. You contribute, you get rewarded. That's how we think. Now, why should these people not do anything?
Yeah,
not do anything, and they get oil in the ground.
You can apply that in any way you want.
I know you can.
Any way you want.
But that's who settled the country.
Yeah. What an incredible achievement
Europe
this film is.
Us Europeans and, we Europeans, I should say, and Scandinavians, I don't necessarily think there was too, it was just interesting for me in history, that it was too unsettled for the Mediterranean countries to come over. The only time I think the heavy, from what I've read in the history of Sicily, let's say, the main immigration began after the Civil War when the South needed workers to replace, because slavery was abolished. And the Italian, apparently, I guess it was the Italian government, I may be wrong, sent a couple 100,000 Sicilians to New Orleans. And there's a story there, too, because they turned out to do very well. And they became very, very close with the black community. And they were doing very well. And then it all exploded in 1909, I think, where one of the chief of police got killed, et cetera. They blamed it on the Sicilians, blah, blah, blah. And they said, you're bringing them in. They're bringing in their crime syndicates and things like that. But they were doing very well together with the African-American community.
It's funny, the psychology is one thing, right? Sometimes I feel like, you can keep your psychology, but don't get in between me and my money. And it's just, It's the money.
It's the money. It's always the money.
Always the money.
It really is always the money. And look, it's great to have money to take care of your family, and I don't mean that too. People keep complaining. They used to say, just throw money at them, That's not going to solve it. Because the more you throw at them, the more they're going to want.
Which is a big theme in this film. I mean, they not the more that you want, but the more, the ending was set in stone the second the ground opened up.
Absolutely. We know it's there, it's inevitable. Now let's see how it works.
Yes.
And it works through, in a terrible way, it works a lot through love. I mean, the last thing, I don't want to give it away, but one of the last things De Niro says to Leo in the jail, he says, I love you, son.
Oh, it's just
That's his last.
So
That's
conflicting.
his last weapon to get Leo back. I love you, son.
Love's going to get you.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love this quote. Music and film are almost one and the same. You probably said it a long time ago, but you've stayed true to it. You have consistently worked with music in a way that is caring to the music and great for your film, not in a reductive way. Everything is additive. And I love that about the way you've worked with film throughout your life. You clearly love music.
I really do, yeah. I mean, it started with, I was born in 42, so 1945 I contracted asthma, wasn't allowed to go do sports, wasn't allowed to run around, you had to be careful till kids get into laughing fits and they get spasms, and you couldn't do that either because you can't breathe. And so my parents were working class people, and they didn't have, they read, but they didn't have books in the house, and so it was radio and phonograph records. And the radio I would listen to shows like Gangbusters that we referred to by the end of our movie. And by the way, the show at the end of our movie is based on the real shows that we have the scripts of the Osage murder shows presented to you by the FBI. And as I pointed out a number of times, ours is bad, but theirs was worse. Really bad.
Yeah.
Anyway, but that's 1933, 34. Yeah. Okay. The records were something. The records were primarily the ones that came to mind. I was 4, 5, 6 years old listening to these things, playing them. What was the swing music of Benny Goodman?
Benny Goodman.
Yeah, the Benny Goodman Quartet.
Mm-hmm.
Avalon.
Mm-hmm.
Most of King Porter Stomp, all that stuff. But primarily it was Django Reinhardt and the Hot Club of France. There were 5 78s, and both sides. I played them over and over again. And I didn't know, as a child, I didn't know that it was a group of instruments that was creating the sound. I thought it was one sound.
Yeah, it must be the closest thing to magic at that moment.
Yes, it really was. So I would imagine things in my mind. I'd imagine almost like abstract films or movement, a lot of movement. And so from that point, that was my first touch with creativity, was the
combination.
Yeah, was what that sound, particularly their music, the Hot Club of France, what that sound did in my head and in my body. And then it started to combine with motion pictures, with pictures I could draw on the edge of the persistence of vision. That I saw a movie called The Magic Box in 1950. My father took me to see it. It was about the invention of cinema. Robert Donat. It's a British film. It's a very sweet film. And they showed the persistence of vision, where you could draw a little stick figure on the margins of a book, and then you move it a little bit, and you flip the book, and it flips, and you see the move. And so that with the music,
kids still do that today. By the way, isn't it amazing? The most simple introduction idea.
Thing. Yeah. I remember my daughter going to when she was about 9 years old in school, came back and said, "Look, Dad, look at this camera," and it was a pinhole camera. Yeah. I said, "For all this, you have no, but look what you could do with it."
My life is nothing. I've done nothing.
A little pinhole camera. Yes, the pinhole camera is great. We even tried doing pinhole photography for this film.
Yeah.
We rejected because it got to be too. It was
felt like
such
too much
a difference.
a feature, like you're making a statement.
The black and white stuff in the beginning.
Yeah.
Well, I have a camera that's from 1916, and you have to do the. It was hand cranked, those scenes, based on the actual 16 millimeter footage the Osage took. By the way, they were so rich they had cameras.
Wow. One of the things I love about the way you've used film is that you have this innate ability to create a contrast between how I heard the songs and how I see them now. Be My Baby being an example. That song is supposed to be a song which ultimately it makes you feel some kind of way. There's a yearning of unrequited love, a desire to be with somebody. It's supposed to be innocent and pure. You use it in a way, even down to the fact that you clearly had to put it in your film off a turntable because you can hear it, the RPM slowing and speeding up.
I know, and you can even hear the scratches.
It adds a sense of, it's an unsettling experience almost.
That sound was unsettling.
Yeah.
That wall of sound that he created.
It was so weird. Looking back, they were the pop songs of the time, but they were weird.
They really were.
Spooky songs.
Yeah, they sounded like they were coming from some sort of strange dungeon somewhere.
Boom.
Yeah,
boom. Like,
you'll never forget those opening beats. And when Harvey puts his head on the pillow, cut, bang.
Desperation, exhaustion. Uncertainty, all to the soundtrack of a song that was supposed to make people dance.
Yes, I know.
You seem to love that. That seems to be something that you really appreciate with source music at times.
That's what we felt living with that music. When I say living with it, it was, in your apartment, tenements downtown on Elizabeth Street. My parents, I had to live with them until I got out and got married in 1965, I think it was. But, we also, on the weekends, we had our after-hour places and private club bars, so to speak, that just sort of pay off the cops a little bit, and they let you have your, some scotch and rye, et cetera. And there was a jukebox, and the sound of that jukebox in those places at night, that's what it was. And there was always a sense of danger.
Yeah.
It just was, and that's how it developed. And the music, particularly in the summer, was played. The jukebox sometimes was taken out of the back and placed right on the sidewalk. And you'd have, the Spectre sound. You'd have the Marvelettes. You'd have Motown.
With life going on all around you.
Life going on all around you. The butcher meat being delivered to the butcher, and fish store going, and the pork store down the block. I mean, the funeral parlor, funeral you have to pass, you have to stop. I mean, all this going on. It was like
film school.
This was also, it was like Hogarth.
Yeah.
Or it was like Bosch. Or it was like Bruegel, And, but I was scared by it at first because the first years of my life were spent in Corona, Queens. And it was a different kind of place. It was, my parents got married in 1933. They were born in those buildings on Elizabeth Street, 241 and 232, which is still there. And when they got married, coming from families of eight or nine brothers and sisters, all living together, so they wanted to get away from that neighborhood. Wasn't a great neighborhood, and to move to like the country. And Corona, Queens, or Jamaica, Queens was like the country. And so in 34, 35, I guess they did. I was born in 42. But in 49, my father had some problem with the landlord, and it had to be settled, and we lost. And so we moved back. They moved back to Elizabeth Street, and it was my first time.
So you've gone from the country back.
I'm thrown in with the dead end kids.
Wow.
You're playing with the garbage pail covers like shields, like chasing rats, Chasing the rats out of the butcher shop was always a festive experience. No, everybody run after the rats are bad, man.
A bit.
In a neighborhood like that, it was bad because that's you got to think Elizabeth Street. I'm talking 1950.
Yeah.
1900, Elizabeth Street was listed as the leading area of New York for infant mortality. Because of cholera, because of all those things that we get a sense of it now with the pandemic. But at that time, it was all the time. Smallpox, cholera, everything. And so cleanliness was important. You see a rat, it had to go. And the best way to get the rat to go is get the butcher. And so all of this going on, it was traumatizing. And then they just took me to the movies a lot. And so I stayed in the street. And as we got a little older, the music really, and by the way, the music also right at that time, right around the time, right before the crossover music, Bill Haley doing Shake, Rattle, and Roll, but not hearing Big Joe Turner do it. Then you heard Big Joe Turner do it, Laverne Baker, you heard, all this, and then suddenly Elvis. Well, so the music from 50 to 55 was, Sinatra, Bennett, Tony Bennett, some really wonderful pop songs, and more than pop songs that come from the American Songbook. So I really had a great appreciation of Cole Porter and Dietz, Rodgers and Hammerstein, Rodgers and Hart. You can go on.
Well, these songs were also looking for an environment to embellish the story that you heard yourself. They were looking for a place where they could attach themselves to a story, and you gave it to them, and you sourced music in ways no one had ever done it before. I'll never forget the moment I saw that scene in Mean Streets with Jumping Jack Flash. Ever.
Yeah.
I knew the song, obviously. My parents had played it to me, and I was excited to see the film. It was after it came out. I watched it on VHS, and I remember my friend was like, you got to see it. We're discovering Martin Scorsese now.
Yes.
We're in our Scorsese era. This is what we're going to do. We're watching Mean Streets, and there it is. And I'm watching these cocksure dudes walk through, and there's the psycho, and the whole thing feels it just felt so dangerous.
It really was.
The music felt dangerous. The Stones all of a sudden just were even more dangerous.
I always felt that. And I felt that their music, it had the same impact to me as, Kurt Weill, Bertolt Brecht, Three Penny Opera.
Yeah.
There's a danger in that music.
Yeah.
How you keep a man alive, he lives off others. He likes to taste him first and eat them whole if he can.
Yeah.
Forgets that they're supposed to be his brothers. I mean, that's what it was like in the streets. That's a quote from one of the songs in How to Keep a Man Alive. I think in How Does a Man Stay Alive? I forget the title. In Three Penny Opera, the Carmen Capalbo version that was on the Theatre de Lis off Broadway, and I got to see it there. But for me, you see, if I ever got to make a film, I knew I didn't belong in Hollywood, and so the impetus of John Cassavetes, Shirley Clark, Jonas Mekas, the whole New York Underground, although I was not bohemian with the artists, etc. I knew that I didn't deserve a movie score in a way. Those are certain kinds of films, and therefore I had to create my own score. And of course, I was living to music. Things would happen.
But it was by necessity.
Yes, it was by necessity. We got a push, of course, by Kenneth Anger in Scorpio Rising.
Yeah.
There's no doubt. That's a short film, however. But he was bold enough to use all that music, and brilliantly. He was genius. And shockingly, by the way.
But that's what's so amazing watching these films and how you've used this music by necessity or otherwise, is how shocking it must have been at the time and how shocking it still is. I think about the ways that you use Give Me Shelter in all of your films, and I've heard that song in so many different ways, and yet every time you use it, it adds a different feeling to me.
It's a funny thing. I keep forgetting. I remember only using it in The Departed. And when Mick got up and when we did Shine a Light in Berlin press conference and says, I just want you to know this is the only film Martin Scorsese made that he didn't put Gimme Shelter in. And I felt like a jerk.
I just love in that film how they're giving you such a hard time. It's almost like a game.
Oh, it was a game. It was a game. The only thing there was to try to get him on camera.
They did too.
You know?
It was so good. I've got to, and I know we're running out of time, but oh my gosh, there's so much I could talk to you about just in relation to the way you've worked with music in your film, but it would be really silly of me not to talk about Layla and not to talk about the chemistry that moment has in Goodfellas at the end and the way that it works so beautifully throughout. And the question I've always wanted to ask you, because I know how it made me and millions of other people feel. What does it feel like when you see it for the first time, not in your head, but when the chemistry of that music?
Oh, that's like nothing you've ever. That's, in a sense, one of the, I guess, crazy things that it makes you want to, I don't know, make a painting, create a piece of music, create literature. It's something that happens. They are, I must say, sometimes we use the word as a joke, but it kind of transcends what you're doing.
Yeah.
It really does. You're off into another universe. And I played that music back on the set for those shots. Mm. It was played out in the streets. And so the crew felt it too. Layla was just something I love. I also didn't know the history of Layla.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. I just took the last part of it, but the drummer did, and the whole thing, and Eric Clapton and all those guys were really nice. Said, okay, we don't usually give an okay for the song, but they did for that. I did have the opportunity to work with some great composers, though, of course, Elmer Bernstein, of course, Bernard Herrmann, Howard Shore, and Philip Glass, So but it has been 27 films. Primarily, I make up my own tracks.
Oh, not just that, you combine your tracks. In Casino in the Desert, you're putting two songs over each other. I've never seen that in a film in my life.
Robbie come up to me at one point and he said, hey, listen, don't forget, De La Rue, Contempt. I said, you're right. Le Mépris, man. Yeah, let's play Le Mépris. Why don't we take other themes from other movies and use them in our films? And on top of that, put them over Ginger Baker's live Toad.
Crazy. That is the rule break of all time in cinema. I'd never seen anyone do that before. That's DJ work.
DJ work. Robbie just walked by and said, yeah, why don't you listen to that again? You never know, because Le Mépris is also about infidelity. It's about selling out. It's a wonderful film that Godard made, Contempt. And that music is so sad, so beautiful.
And
so
here comes
tragic.
Ginger Baker, so crazy,
and then Ginger
so
Baker
intense,
comes.
Oh my gosh. I remember seeing that for the first time and just being like, well, someone's getting killed.
But that was the fun.
And they didn't. That's the thing about you, Martin Scorsese, is no one died in that scene.
No, I know, nobody did. No, because the problem is, it's coming. It's coming, but it ain't happening yet. The thing about it, too, is that, why not use... In a way, you're right. You're talking about what they used to call sampling. Is that it?
Yeah, basically you mashed up songs on film.
Let's take Miklos Rotz's music from King of Kings and put it in here. Why can't we use other themes from other movies?
Why not?
Yeah. It is considered classical music. I mean, Wolfgang Korngold is considered a classical composer.
Yeah.
Dmitri Tiomkin did some beautiful stuff. He loved Debussy.
Yeah.
So why not play with that?
Oh, wow. I mean, it changed everything, and you've continued to do so. This film is so wonderful. I mean this is the greatest compliment. I'm not sure how many times I can watch it because it's so intense and and it's hard, but it's so perfect.
Oh, thank you.
And I will watch it several times, but it's something that will stay with you on one watch forever, and it's incredible. I have one more question for you if you have time. And again, when this goes out, the film will have been seen. I don't think I'm giving anything away, but it'll be available. You carry the last scene.
Oh yes, yeah.
You carry the last scene, and you're no stranger to being in your films, either voice actor or on screen.
Sometimes of necessity, like my mother and father too. I said, "You're in it. That's it. We have no choice."
But we love it when you do it. We love it when you do it. Necessity or otherwise, we're here for it. But I wanted to finish by asking you, it feels so poignant and personal that you have the last word in this film. And I wonder just simply what prompted the decision to do that scene yourself.
Well, the radio show idea or the epilogue idea was something that Eric and I had for the original day one, basically. And there were other issues, but eventually I said, no, we're staying with this. It's going to be this. The entertainment value of the tragedy and the suffering we've just seen becomes a show saying, and don't forget, light up with Lucky Strikes.
Oh, it helps us leave the theater.
Yeah.
You actually give us a way to leave and process. Otherwise, I would still be sitting in that theater a week later.
No. But the problem was that yes, and I don't know how to really phrase it, but the problem is the responsibility we have too as entertainers, so to speak, maybe taking advantage of the tragedy and the suffering of what we've just shown by making entertainment. But if the entertainment could sustain and it could be something that has depth and maybe it's something that an audience could still resonate with an audience a year later or 2 years later, maybe they could even find out something about themselves. That might be okay. But the film is in that way too. So therefore, the only person to come out and read the obituary would be me. I'd have to take it. And one of the other reasons was it was the last, we had shot the film and then we went back in New York and shot the last couple of days in that theater. And one of the other reasons was I honestly didn't know at that point if I could direct anybody to read that obituary. I just couldn't. I didn't know what to tell them. And so I said, you know what, why don't you try it? And if it doesn't work, it's a single medium shot, basically. You can get another actor going. At least you will have cracked it and said, okay, what I couldn't do, this is what I need from so-and-so, from so-and-so. So I did it. And as I was doing it, my wife was there, my granddaughter, one of my daughters, some friends. I was in my old high school, Cardinal Hayes. They have a great theater there, so we shot there. And I'm looking around. And I had been to Molly Burkhart's grave and saw all the graves lined up. Then I looked down there and I see them and I said to myself, there she was lying next to her mother, her father, her sisters, and then her daughter. And it just hit me. And what happened too is that something happened with the people there too. They said that was really interesting because we were the radio itself doing the sound effects, and that was kind of enjoyable. But this brought everything back down. And so I said, all right, let's go with it. Let's see if people like it. People, or not like it, but if they get affected by it. And so I went that way, and it's a way of, having been there at Pine Ridge and over the years, as a way of putting it on my own shoulders too.
Yeah, you carried it. Thank you.
Thank you.